The night had a quiet hum to it, the kind of silence that only small towns knew. After 11 p.m. the neon "Open" sign flickered weakly against the glass window of the last stop convenience store, its blue and red glow reflecting off the freshly mopped floor. Inside, Emma Carson, 22, was counting the last of the day's cash, her fingers moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who'd done this hundreds of nights before. She worked the night shift almost every day, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Her mother's medical bills, her little brother's school fees, everything stacked up like weights on her shoulders. And though her face carried the soft innocence of someone who still believed in kindness, her eyes had learned to stay sharp. The town of Oak Ridge wasn't big, but lately it had been changing. Outsiders had been rolling in, loud cars, cheap tattoos, and a kind of arrogance that didn't belong. The police station 2 blocks away might as well have been on the moon. Everyone knew not to call unless it was serious, and even then help came slow. Emma glanced at the clock. 11:47 p.m. Another 13 minutes and she'd lock the doors, drop the register money into the safe, and head home. She was humming quietly to herself when the door chime jingled. Her heart sank. 3 men walked in. They weren't regulars. She knew all her regulars, the truckers, the tired nurses, the night shift mechanics who'd stop by for coffee. These men didn't look like any of them. They looked like trouble. The first one was tall and wiry, wearing a leather jacket that looked like it had seen too many fights. The second was heavier, with greasy hair and a smirk that didn't leave his face. The third had a shaved head and a tattoo that ran from his neck down beneath his shirt collar. "Store's closing," Emma said softly, clutching the edge of the counter. The tall one grinned. "Yeah, we saw that. Thought we'd grab something real quick." He walked slowly down the aisle, dragging his hand across the shelves, knocking off a pack of chips just to see her flinch. The heavier one leaned on the counter, too close, so close she could smell the cheap whiskey on his breath. "You always work here alone, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice low and taunting. Emma's pulse jumped, "Just till midnight." He laughed. "Ain't safe for a pretty thing like you to be alone this late." His hand inched toward the name tag pinned to her shirt. "Emma, huh?" She stepped back. "You need to pay for something." The third man, the one with the tattoo, was packing near the door looking outside. "Ain't nobody around," he muttered. "Perfect little ghost town." Emma's fingers brushed against the panic button under the counter, but she didn't press it. Sometimes that button didn't work, and if it didn't tonight, she'd be trapped. She tried to stay calm. "If you're not buying anything, I'll have to ask you to leave." The tall one turned from the aisle holding a bottle of soda. "Relax, sweetheart, we're just saying hi." But the way his eyes lingered on her made it clear. It wasn't just a friendly visit. He set the soda on the counter, slid a few crumpled bills across. "Keep the change." Then his hand came down hard, trapping her wrist beneath his. "You look scared." She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "Let go," she whispered. The heavy one laughed. "Oh, come on, we're just having fun." The tattooed one locked the door behind them. The click echoed like a gunshot in the small store. Emma's chest tightened. Her mind raced. Should she scream? Should she run? There was nowhere to go. "Don't make this hard," the tall one said, his smile turning dark. "We just want to talk. Maybe you pour us a drink, huh?" Then from the back of the store, there was a sound. A deep, low clunk. The men froze. Emma's eyes darted toward the stockroom door. It was half open, just a sliver of darkness behind it. She hadn't been back there since her break hours ago. "What was that?" the heavy one muttered. "Probably the fridge," said the tall one, but his voice carried uncertainty. Another sound followed, this time the creak of a boot on tile. The tattooed man turned. "Someone back there." Emma didn't say a word. Her heart was pounding so loud she was sure they could hear it. The tall one jerked her forward. "You got someone hiding in here." She shook her head, barely breathing. The backroom door creaked open wider. From the shadowed hallway, a shape emerged. Large, broad-shouldered. Leather cut, patches glinting faintly under the fluorescent lights. A man stepped out. His beard was thick, his eyes dark and cold. Behind him, another shape moved, and another. 3 men, each wearing the same patch on their jackets. The air changed instantly. The thugs stepped back. "Who the hell are you?" the tall one demanded. The man at the front, massive, with a scar cutting across his cheek, spoke in a low, steady voice. "We were just finishing our coffee." Emma's breath caught. She remembered them now. They'd come in an hour ago, 3 bikers, quiet, polite, who'd ordered coffee and sat in the corner booth near the back. They hadn't said much, just nodded when she'd refilled their cups. She thought they'd left. Apparently not. The leader's voice rumbled again. "You boys got a problem here." The thugs hesitated. The heavy one stammered, "Just buying a drink, man." The biker's eyes flicked to Emma. "That true, miss?" Her voice trembled. They locked the door." The tattooed thug cursed under his breath. "Hey, we don't want trouble, all right." The leader took one slow step forward, boots heavy against the tile. "Then unlock that door." No one moved. The air was thick with silence. Emma could feel something shifting, an invisible line being drawn across the floor. The tall thug tried to sound tough. "Look, man, we were just—" But he didn't finish. The biker stepped closer until their faces were inches apart. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the whole store. "You were just what?" The thug swallowed hard. Behind the leader, the other 2 bikers spread out silently, positioning themselves near the aisles, their presence filling every inch of the room. Emma watched, frozen, as the tall one's bravado began to crumble. He finally pulled out a key and turned toward the door. The leader didn't move. He simply said slowly. The lock clicked open. The biker looked back at Emma. "You okay?" She nodded, though her eyes glistened. Then the heavy one made the mistake. He muttered something under his breath, something that sounded like biker trash. The leader's head turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "What you say?" The thug hesitated, and nothing. The biker smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile that promised a reckoning. "You sure?" His brothers chuckled softly, a dangerous, almost amused sound. The leader took another step forward. The thugs backed toward the door, mumbling something about leaving. The biker didn't stop them. He just watched. They pushed through the door and stumbled outside, one of them nearly tripping on the curb. Emma exhaled shakily. "Thank you," she whispered. The leader looked at her with calm eyes. "You don't thank us yet." Before she could ask what he meant, a loud crash echoed from outside. The sound of metal scraping, shouting, then silence. The leader's jaw tightened. "Stay here." The 3 bikers walked toward the door in perfect unison. Emma stood behind the counter, frozen. The cool hum of the fridge was the only sound now. Through the window, she saw the flash of headlights. Then the door swung shut behind them, and the night swallowed everything. To be continued. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud, leaving Emma standing alone under the cold white lights. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the counter. Outside, the air seemed to shift, like the quiet before a storm. Through the glass, she could just make out the silhouettes of the 3 thugs. They weren't leaving. Instead, they were circling the bikers' motorcycles parked at the far end of the lot. One of them kicked a tire, another spat on a chrome fender. Emma felt her stomach twist. She could see the bikers moving toward them, steady, calm, no rush, no panic, just purpose. The leader, the one with the scar across his cheek, walked a few paces ahead of the others. His shoulders were square, his head slightly bowed as if already tired of what he knew was about to happen. The other 2 bikers flanked him, their leather cuts catching the yellow glow of the streetlights. The tall thug sneered. "Nice bikes, old man," he called out. Would be a shame if something happened to them. The scarred biker stopped walking. For a long moment he didn't say a word. Then he looked up, and when his eyes met the thug, the temperature seemed to drop. "Touch it again," he said quietly. The heavy thug barked a laugh. "What you gonna stop us? There's 3 of you." The biker's lips curved slightly. "You should count again." The thugs hesitated, confused, until they noticed shadows shifting behind the glass storefront. 2 more bikers stepped out from the darkness of the store's side entrance. One had long, gray hair tied back in a ponytail. The other was young, muscular, his knuckles already scarred. There weren't 3 of them anymore. There were 5. The tattooed thug's confidence faltered. "We don't want no trouble," he muttered, his voice cracking slightly. The leader stepped closer until his boots scraped against the gravel. "You had your chance to walk away inside," he said, voice calm but low. "Now you made it my problem." The tall thug pulled something from his pocket, a knife, small but glinting under the light. "Stay back," he barked. The bikers didn't flinch. The scarred one tilted his head slightly. "That's a cute knife." "Last warning," the thug shouted. The biker raised his hand slightly, not in surrender but in invitation. "Then take your shot." The tall thug hesitated for just a second, then lunged. He didn't get far. The biker sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist mid-swing, twisted, and the sound of cracking bone echoed through the lot. The knife clattered to the ground. The thug screamed. Before the heavy one could react, the biker with gray hair slammed him against the hood of a car with a dull thunk, pinning him there effortlessly. The younger biker stepped forward, landing a clean punch across the tattooed one's jaw that sent him stumbling back into the pavement. Emma gasped from behind the glass. She could see everything, the chaos outside unfolding like a scene from an old western. The bikers moved with precision, not rage. Every motion was controlled, deliberate. The tall thug was on his knees, clutching his broken wrist, groaning. The scarred biker crouched in front of him. "You like scaring girls?" he asked quietly. "You like locking doors on people smaller than you?" The thug didn't answer. His breathing was ragged. The biker leaned closer, his eyes dark and steady. "You ever try that again, you won't need your hands to worry about." The man whimpered, nodding quickly. The heavy thug, still pinned to the car, tried to speak. "We didn't mean." The gray-haired biker pressed him down harder. "Don't lie, you meant it till you met us." "Please, man, we'll go. We'll leave town," the heavy one pleaded. The scarred leader stood, brushing his gloves. "You'll leave right now." He gestured to their car, an old blue sedan parked near the curb. "And if I ever see that car again in Oak Ridge, I'll make sure it's scrap." The tattooed thug was on the ground, spitting blood. He looked up at the bikers, hatred flickering in his eyes. "You think you're some kind of heroes?" The scarred man paused, turning his gaze on him. "No," he said evenly. "We just don't like cowards." He motioned to the others and they stepped back, giving the thug space to crawl toward their car. The heavy one helped the tall one up, while the tattooed one stumbled behind them, limping. As the car engine roared to life and tore out of the parking lot, gravel sprayed across the asphalt. The bikers stood there for a while, silent, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. Inside the store, Emma hadn't moved. She was still behind the counter, watching through the glass, her breath fogging the window slightly. The scarred biker turned, catching her eyes. Then slowly the group walked back toward the store. She unlocked the door before they even reached it. I thought they were going to hurt me," she whispered. "They were," the leader said simply, stepping inside. "You all right?" She nodded shakily. "I think so, I didn't know anyone was still here." "Good thing we like our coffee hot," the gray-haired biker said with a small grin. The younger one chuckled softly, wiping a bit of blood from his knuckles. "Guess we picked the right night for a refill." Emma let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her lungs for hours. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. I mean it. The leader studied her for a moment, his expression softened just a little. You don't need to thank us, just stay sharp, all right? Lock the doors early next time. She nodded again, I will. He looked around the store at the knocked-over display near the counter, the chips scattered on the floor. Then he turned back to her. You got a boss. Yeah, but he doesn't care much what happens after dark. The biker's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of anger there, but it wasn't for her. He should, he muttered. The gray-haired one leaned on the counter. You got someone to drive you home. Emma hesitated. I usually walk. The younger biker frowned. Not tonight, you don't. Before she could protest, the scarred man spoke. We'll follow you home. Make sure you get there safe. Her eyes widened. You don't have to. He cut her off gently. We know. There was something steady, protective, in his tone that made her nod instead of arguing. She grabbed her bag, locked the register, and stepped out with them. The night felt colder now, the kind of cold that seeped through skin and bone, but for the first time she didn't feel afraid. Her little apartment was only a few blocks away, down a quiet residential street. The bikers followed her slowly on their bikes, the low rumble of the engines echoing through the empty town. Streetlights glowed dimly, their halos stretching across the wet asphalt. When she reached her building, she turned back to them. I really can't thank you enough, she said softly. The scarred biker gave a small nod. You don't owe us anything, just keep your head up. She smiled faintly. Can I at least know your names? The man thought for a moment, then said, Name's Cole. That's Mason and the kid there, Ryder. Cole, she repeated quietly. I won't forget that. He looked at her one last time, then started his bike. The engines thundered to life again, but this time the sound felt like safety. As the trio rode off into the dark, Emma stood at her doorway, watching until the taillights disappeared into the mist. But just as she turned to go inside, her phone buzzed. A text from the store's landline, the one only her manager and the staff used. Unknown number. It read, You think we're done. Her heart froze. The phone slipped from her hand. And far down the road, the roar of 3 motorcycles began to rise again, turning back toward the store. To be continued. The moment Emma saw that message, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart hammered so hard it almost drowned out every sound around her. She picked up her phone again, her trembling fingers barely able to keep hold of it. You think we're done. The words glowed on her screen like a threat carved in fire. She looked up, her eyes scanning the quiet street. No movement, no headlights, just silence, but she knew. Somehow deep down she knew they hadn't left town. Her hands shook as she tried to call the store's landline back, but there was no answer. Then from somewhere far off came the low rumble of engines. Not the deep, solid growl of the bikers, but the sharp, erratic sputter of a beat-up sedan. They were coming back. Emma stepped back into the doorway of her apartment, her breathing ragged. Then she froze. At the end of the street, twin headlights turned the corner. The same blue sedan, dented hood and all, rolled slowly toward her building. Her blood went cold. The car stopped halfway down the block. Doors opened. 3 shadows stepped out. The tall thug, his wrist in a makeshift wrap of torn fabric. The heavy one holding something long, maybe a tire iron. The tattooed one, face bruised and swollen from the earlier fight, his expression twisted with rage. Hey, sweetheart, he called out, his voice echoing across the street. You tell your biker boyfriends thanks for the souvenir. He raised his hand and Emma saw it. The scarred biker's patch, torn from his jacket, clenched in the thug's fist. Emma's stomach dropped. How did they get that? She backed into her doorway, fumbling for her keys, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The heavy thug grinned. You think they can protect you forever? She slammed the door shut and locked it. Her heart was racing so fast she could barely think. She reached for her phone again and typed a single message to the only number she remembered from the store. "Emma, they came back. My apartment, please." Before she could hit send, a loud bang rattled the door. She screamed. "Come on, open up," one of them shouted, followed by laughter. "We just want to talk." Another bang, the hinges creaked. Emma dropped her phone, stumbled backward into her tiny living room. There was nowhere to run. The window was too small, the fire escape too far. The third hit cracked the wood. And then, before the next came, a sound cut through the night. A deep, roaring thunder that grew louder with every heartbeat. Motorcycles. Emma's eyes widened. She ran to the window, peeking through the blinds. Down the street, 4 headlights appeared out of the darkness, 2 wide, 2 closer behind. The sound wasn't just loud, it was commanding, primal. The kind of sound that made everything in its path move or be crushed. The thugs turned toward it, momentarily frozen in the glare of approaching beams. The bikes didn't stop. Cole was in the lead. The scarred biker's face was set in stone, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the scene ahead. Mason and Ryder flanked him, with another biker behind. One Emma hadn't seen before, older, broader, wearing a black helmet with a silver stripe down the center. The bike skidded to a halt, engines growling low. Cole swung off his Harley and walked forward, his boots hitting the pavement like a drumbeat of judgment. The other bikers followed, spreading out in a line between Emma's building and the thugs. The tall one stepped back, his confidence wavering. "What the hell, man, you following her?" Cole's voice was low, almost calm. "You made this easy." He nodded once. And then it began. The tattooed thug charged first, swinging the stolen patch like a taunt. Cole caught his arm mid-swing, drove his elbow into the man's chest, and threw him down hard. The patch fluttered to the ground. The heavy one swung the tire iron at Mason, but Mason ducked, drove his shoulder into the man's ribs, and sent him sprawling into the car. The metal weapon clattered across the pavement. Ryder faced the tall thug, who tried to punch him with his good hand. The younger biker caught it easily and returned a clean strike that dropped the thug to his knees. Emma stood frozen behind the window, her hands over her mouth. The sound of fists hitting flesh filled the night, each thud echoing like thunder. But there was no chaos in it, no cruelty. The bikers didn't fight like men seeking blood, they fought like men restoring balance. When it was over, the thugs were on the ground, groaning, bleeding, broken. Cole stood over them, his breath heavy in the cold air. He looked down at the tattooed man, who was clutching his chest and coughing. "You should have left," Cole said quietly. "We gave you that mercy once, you won't get it again." The thug spat weakly. "You think you can do whatever you want, you're just—" Cole crouched low, his scar catching the faint light of a street lamp. "No," he interrupted. "We do what needs to be done when others won't." Then he stood, turned, and kicked the man's car keys into a storm drain. The heavy thug whimpered, holding his side. "Please, we'll leave, I swear." Cole stared down at him for a long moment, then gave a single nod to Mason. Mason grabbed the man by the jacket, lifted him halfway, and pointed toward the road. "Walk. And don't stop till you hit the highway." The 3 thugs scrambled up, stumbling, limping, supporting each other. They didn't even look back. Within seconds they were gone, disappearing into the dark like ghosts fleeing judgment. Cole turned to Emma's building. "You can come out now," he said. She opened the door slowly, her face pale under the porch light. I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "They said." Cole shook his head gently. "You did fine." She looked at the patch on the ground, the one the thug had waved in his hand. She bent down and picked it up carefully, brushing away the dirt. The leather was torn, but the symbol still showed, a winged skull with the words Iron Souls MC. She held it out to him. "This is yours." Cole took it silently, his eyes lingering on it for a moment before slipping it back into his pocket. You kept calm, he said. That's more than most would have done. Emma smiled faintly, tears threatening to spill. I thought they were going to kill me. Cole's voice softened. Not while we're around. Ryder leaned against his bike, wiping his knuckles. Boss, he said, wanna call the cops? Cole shook his head. They'll find what's left of those three soon enough. That's all the statement we need. Mason chuckled quietly, lighting a cigarette. You always know how to end a night, huh? Cole gave a small, tired smile. Wasn't planning on overtime. Emma laughed shakily. The sound was small, but it broke through the heaviness in the air. She looked up at them, these men who'd walked out of the shadows not once but twice to save her. I don't know why you helped me, she said, but I'll never forget it. Cole met her gaze. We don't pick who needs help. Sometimes we just happen to be there when no one else is. He started his bike, the deep rumble filling the street again. Mason and Ryder followed suit. The older biker, the one who hadn't said a word the whole time, gave Emma a brief nod before rolling his engine. Take care of yourself, Emma, Cole said. I will, she replied softly, and thank you for everything. The engines roared, filling the night with thunder once more. The iron souls rode off into the distance, their taillights glowing red as they disappeared beyond the corner. Emma stood on the porch long after they were gone, the sound of their bikes echoing faintly in the hills beyond Oak Ridge. She looked down at the cracked pavement, where the torn patch had fallen earlier, now pressed into her palm like a memory. She whispered into the night, I won't forget. Then she went inside, locked her door, and for the first time in months, slept without fear. Miles away, at an old gas station off Route 9, the iron souls pulled over. Mason tossed his cigarette to the ground, Ryder leaned against the pumps, and Cole sat quietly on his bike, the torn patch still in his hand. Think she'll be all right? Ryder asked. Cole looked toward the dark horizon. Yeah, he said quietly. She's got fight in her. People like that don't break easy. The gray-haired biker grinned. And those punks. Cole slipped the patch back into his vest. They'll remember us every time they look in the mirror. The others chuckled lowly, the sound carried by the wind. Then, as dawn began to tint the sky pink, Cole started his engine again. Come on, boys, we got miles to ride. The four bikes rolled out, engines growling, wheels cutting through the fog like blades through mist. And as they vanished down the highway, the town of Oak Ridge settled back into silence, safe again, though no one but Emma would ever know why. The end.